Chapter 30, Auspicious Hall, Dorset, England, dated June 15th, 1889. It's cold. Ghost was not wrong, the house was indeed cold, although that was far from the most noticeable thing about the hallway which stretched out before the assembled group. The most obvious thing was that it was so very dark. The inside of the building appeared from the doorway to be an empty, sprawling abyss of shadows which loomed ominously in front of them. Although Ray supposed Ghost was likely used to the dark. "I'm quite sorry about that," Martin muttered, appearing in the doorway behind them with his suitcase, which he deposited on the ground with a grunt of effort. "I believe some of the gas heating and lighting systems are out. In fact, I was quite hoping to find someone to convert them to electric while we're here." He turned to Jamie, who was lingering behind him on the front step, and placed a hand on the youth's shoulder. "Are you going to be all right in there, Jamie? It's not completely dark, I promise, and we'll fix it soon enough." Jamie nodded, taking a deep breath. I'll be okay, I think. He glanced at Ray and Ghost. "As long as I'm near people for a while." "Thank you, Professor Taurus." The therapist nodded, smiling. "You're a brave lad, Jamie, and you can just call me Martin if you would like." Jamie smiled faintly. "Right, yes, sorry, force of habit, I suppose." They looked up at Ray, who was eyeing them with concern. "What do you think, Ray?" Jamie asked. Ray wasn't entirely aware of what had caused Jamie's sudden fear of the dark. Not exactly. He had gleaned parts of the origin from the context of conversations and had pieced together a rough idea. Something about Mambu and a basement. His assistant could tell him when they were ready, however. Regardless of the gaps in his knowledge, he was proud of them and was determined to be there for them. "I think it will be wonderful." He smiled warmly. Jamie's smile widened at the response. The indigo scarring of Ray's face was unsettling, yes, but Jamie got the impression now their mentor was more himself than he had been for a very long time. It gave them hope, even if that hope was just a small glimmer. "I was meaning to suggest," Emmanuel said, appearing beside them after making his way up the long drive, "that perhaps Jamie might like to wait until you fix some of the lighting this afternoon?" Ray tilted his head, and Ghost turned away from looking down the hall to raise an eyebrow at the lawyer. "Where else would you have Jamie stay?" he asked. Ray was sure he heard an edge of protectiveness in Ghost's voice, and couldn't help but feel happy about it, be drawn to it in a way. An admiration and perhaps even excitement about their shared care for Jamie. "Well, still here, of course." Emmanuel craned his neck to look up the large building. "I just mean that I have an errand to run before we settle for the night. Ray and I have drafted a letter for Master Laumenthal. William left his hotel in London some days ago, it seems, but I thought perhaps I should deliver this to his home, should he return there. I simply wondered if Jamie might like to accompany me." Jamie looked at Ray nervously. I wouldn't want to leave Ray unattended." Ray shook his head. "Jamie, I'm quite alright to be left alone for an afternoon. I can take care of myself now, I promise. If you want to go, you may." "It would give me a chance to get some of the lights fixed and prepare a bedroom for you," Martin nodded. Jamie swallowed. "Oh, alright then, yes, Mr. Emmanuel," they corrected themselves. "I would love to come with you." "Splendid," Emmanuel grinned. "The carriage is still at the bottom of the drive waiting for us. We should hopefully be back before dawn. Tea time tomorrow at the very latest." The red-headed man strode over and quickly kissed Martin, leaning down slightly to rest his forehead against the shorter man's. "Take care, my love. Try not to blow yourself up with the gas lines." Martin chuckled. "I'll do my best, dear. Don't get lost." He turned to Jamie, winking. "He has a terrible sense of direction. Try to keep him on track, will you?" The youth chuckled. "I shall do, Martin." Jamie went to follow Emmanuel down the driveway, but paused a few steps out. He turned on his heel and ran back inside, throwing out his arms to embrace Ray in a tight hug. Ray stood stunned for a moment, before slowly wrapping his arms around them in return, resting his head on his nephew's. "Be back soon," Jamie whispered into Ray's shoulder. "Promise, just stay safe until then, okay?" Ray nodded, pulling away from the hug slightly to look Jamie in the eye, resting his hand on the back of their head. I will, I promise. I'm not going anywhere without you. Jamie smiled, sniffling, and Ray felt his chest tighten. Okay, Jamie nodded. He turned to Ghost. I'll see you soon, Ghost. Take care of him for me? I'll do my best. Ghost nodded. You have my word. Jamie inclined his head at the gangly man and retreated back outside into the evening light, following Emmanuel towards the carriage. Ray watched as they went, taking a deep breath to try and hold back tears. Martin began bringing Jamie's bags inside. He paused beside Ray, leaning in close to whisper. In my professional opinion, it seems like you needed that hug. Ray laughed. Shut up, Martin. Martin chuckled. There are rooms upstairs. I can tag your bags up if you'd like. In the meantime, stout man leaned against the banisters, which creaked as he rested his weight on them. There's an observatory at the end of the hall, past the kitchen. I think it would be quite suitable for whatever you need while finding Athena and helping your friends. It's a tad run down at the moment, but it should suffice. You two all right to find it by yourselves? I'm sure we will be, Ghost smiled. He debated taking off his ragged coat and hanging it on a stand by the door, but instead he only pulled it tighter around his shoulders. Thank you, Martin, for all you've done for these fine people, and for myself despite being a stranger. Martin smiled, pausing as he started up the stairs. You're welcome, Ghost, and for what it's worth, I would no longer consider you a stranger. You're as much as a friend as anyone. I'm glad to have you here. The professor lifted up the suitcases and continued up the stairs, disappearing from view. Shall I accompany you to this observatory? Ghost asked. He placed his hands deep in his pockets, glancing away from Ray. Or, I would understand, of course, if you wish to be alone. I don't wish to burden myself upon you. Ray shook his head quickly. He pulled a lock of loose, dark hair back and tucked it behind the bandages wrapped around his missing eye. No, I would very much appreciate the company. You wouldn't be a burden at all. Thank you, Ghost. Ray smiled. Wonderful. Ghost smiled his thin, wary smile in return. The two men began walking down the hall, occasionally stopping to turn on the gas lamps as they passed in an attempt to provide some light. Most didn't work at all, but the ones that did provided just enough light to push back the veil of darkness obscuring the halls just a little further. Ghost took a breath, trying to find the right words for what he wanted to say. I know it's not much condolence with all the suffering it's caused, but thank you, Ray, for opening that portal. His voice was tight, and he cleared his voice before continuing. I know it's selfish considering everything it's put you through and the misery it's caused, but I owe you my life just as much as I owe it to Jamie and Athena. Ray was unsure of how to respond. Ghost, He took a long moment to consider his own words as they moved through the hall. How could he respond to such thanks? He had done nothing. He had been controlled and hurt. It was not him who should be thanked. You're welcome, he said finally, for lack of a better response. I suppose it's hopeful, in a way, to know that some good can come of all this tragedy. Ghost nodded, chewing his lip. He couldn't bring himself to look at Ray, and the guilt of the pain caused by his presence weighed heavily in his chest. He wanted to say something else, something to show his gratitude further, but he stopped, caught off guard at sight of the observatory, which now stood before them. Beside him, Ray gasped. The room was, as Martin described, in a state of neglect and disrepair matching the rest of the manor, with peeling wallpaper and surfaces covered in thick layers of dust. What truly caught the two men off guard, however, was the sheer size of the space. The room seemed to stretch on forever, spanning all 3 stories of the home, and finally culminating in segmented glass ceiling. Layers of grime and leaves prevented a clear view of the sky above, but crystalline moonlight broke through in reaching shards, slicing through the darkness in slender spotlights and casting the faded furniture and broken bookshelves in an eerie, dreamlike light. A central metal staircase led to a viewing deck suspended high in the air, containing what appeared to be the remnants of star charting equipment. The sky, Ghost whispered. At the same time that Ray breathed, the stars. The two drifted into the room slowly, their heads craned back to take in the levels of balconies which rung the room. "It's beautiful," Ghost said. "Martin is quite generous." Ray nodded. He wasn't sure exactly what he wanted to say. What he did say, however, was simply, "Athena would love it here." Ghost paused, glancing at the historian. I'm sorry that they're not here to see it. It's taking so long to find them." He swallowed. "It seems like you care for this Athena a great deal. You and Jamie both." Ray smiled, trying to hide the sense of fear for Athena which pervaded every thought he had these days. "Yes, I suppose we do. You would like them, I think, Ghost. Almost everyone does. I took them in almost 9 years ago now. They're like my nephew, I suppose. Family. I owe them my life. And more." It occurred to Ray as he moved through the observatory how easily the words were coming to him as he spoke. Conversing with others was never his strong suit, even with the members of the Fable Society. He had always been the odd one out, the one more closed off than the rest. He had been close to them, but sometimes, even to his closest friends, talking had been difficult. Right here, however, right now, with Ghost, it all just seemed easy. It was easy to simply talk. "I suppose that's something we have in common." Ghost smiled softly, breaking Ray's train of thought. Ray found himself smiling wider than he had in some time as he watched Ghost struggle to light a fire in the cold hearth. "Yes, I suppose it is." He hoped, in a way he didn't quite understand, that they had more in common than just that. I think I used to be able to do this." Ghost huffed, shaking out his shoulders before attempting to strike a piece of flint once again. "Light a fire?" Ray asked, walking to join him by the mantel. Ghost stopped, sitting back on his feet. "Yes, I think I camped often." There was a distant look in Ghost's brown eyes, and his voice was breathy and thin when he spoke again. I can smell the smoke, I think. Feel the cold and the warmth. The fire, it was like her hair." Ray slowly lowered himself to kneel beside Ghost, his brow furrowing with concern. "Whose hair, Ghost?" A tear slowly slid down Ghost's face, coasting over his angular cheekbone. Ghost himself didn't seem to notice. In fact, the rest of his face failed to convey any emotion at all. It was simply a blank mask as he gazed into the empty fireplace. "I don't remember," he whispered. A friend, I think." Why can't I remember her, Ray? Why don't I remember?" Ray moved to place a hand on Ghost's shoulder, but the other man jerked away instinctively, falling back and catching himself before smacking his head on the wooden floor. Ghost blinked at him, recognizing his presence properly once again. In the faint light, his brown eyes seemed almost red. Sorry, touching, I should have remembered," Ray began, but Ghost shook his head as he sat up. "No, it's okay, you just caught me off guard." Ghost took a deep breath. He reached a hand up and touched his wet cheek. "I was crying." "What was I crying about?" "A woman, I think," Ray said, sitting back. He kept his eyes on Ghost, looking the strange man up and down. A small smile tugged at Ghost's lip. "I doubt it was a woman. Not that it couldn't have been, I just mean I don't really... with women, not like that." His voice faltered a moment. "Or maybe... No, you're right. A woman. She was my friend, I think. My best friend, and I can't remember her face, Ray. I can't remember her name. I don't remember anything." "That's all right," Ray nodded. It's alright, Ghost. This is progress, isn't it? Things are coming back to you, which is a good thing, even in pieces. I'm sure you'll remember more in time. Ghost nodded, wiping away the tear. I suppose. Ray reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a box of matches, which he used to light the fire easily. Ghost blinked at him. I did not realize you could do that. He tried to force a smile, but his mind was clearly still elsewhere. And the woman with fiery red hair. For a long while, the two men didn't move. They simply stayed on the floor in silence, soaking in the warmth of the fire and gazing up at the dirty glass ceiling overhead. In his mind, Ray absently tried to figure out a way to clean the roof and open up the view of the sky. For the most part, however, he found his thoughts drifting to Ghost. Something about the man seemed different. It wasn't unsettling in the way everything else had been for months. It was just strange. The jerky, lumbering way he moved, the way his eyes moved frantically searching for the exits in every space he entered, and the way they always seemed to settle on Ray. He wondered if that was because Ghost noticed something about him too. Something strange. He wondered what exactly that was. The auras Ray had seen with the green infected eye were fainter now, the eye gone, but they were still there. He could make out the lingering threads of purple which clung to Ghost's form, barely visible among the shades of green. Ray wondered if that would ever leave him, or if Ghost would always be marked by the connection he had to the end, scars invisible to the naked eye. Ray wondered if his own aura looked the same, and if that was all that the feeling was. The lingering presence of Endarian, reaching for something similar in the world. Ray dreaded that idea, thought that Endarian was the only reason he felt this connection to Ghost. He pushed the idea away. Ray? Ghost asked. The historian tore his eyes away from the ceiling. Ghost took a long breath, pulling his legs up to his chin. What if I do remember who I was before? If I do remember how I got to the end? Ray raised an eyebrow, standing up and pulling a chair up to the fire. Well, that would be a good thing, wouldn't it? I suppose, but... Ghost stood up too, retrieving a chair of his own, which he failed to sit in, instead choosing to stand in front of the fire, staring into it. The flickering shadows only served to make him appear gaunter and more fragile, a skeleton dwarfed by his large coat and shaggy hair. I'm scared. Ghost wasn't sure why he was saying this, why he was comfortable saying any of it at all. He hadn't known Ray for very long, and again, he hadn't really known anyone for long. Despite his reservations, he found the words continuing to spill out. At least it was with Ray. He could feel safe telling this to Ray. He didn't know why. He just knew that he could feel safe. And he did. Scared of remembering? Ray asked. What if I don't like who I was before? Ghost asked as he turned to look at Ray. His eyes were once again filled with tears. I know your life is all the worse for Endarian's presence in it, but what if it was the right thing for me to be there? What if I was someone who deserved to be imprisoned? Ray blinked, unsure of how to respond. His mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Ghost, I don't think... No one deserves what you went through. What any of us have been through, regardless of who you were before. Ghost drew a shaky breath and slowly lowered himself into his chair. Perhaps you're right. I'm just worried that knowing of the life I lost will hurt more than having no life at all. Ray pulled his chair a little closer to the fire, a little closer to Ghost. He thought for a moment, and then answered softly. And at least you have people to help you deal with that pain now. You have a chance to start again, regardless. Ghost nodded. He closed his eyes and leaned his head back against the chair, tears gliding down the lines of his neck. Thank you, Ray. Of course, Ghost, Ray said, stiffly on. Of course. Ray looked into the fire. He was tired. They were all so very tired. But at least here they might be safe for a little while. Here, where they had room to breathe and to rest. Where they had the resources to find Athena. By the time Jamie returned to Auspicious Hall, the sun had already begun to rise overhead. They were exhausted by the journey and wanting nothing more than to simply fall into a bed and never get up again. Jamie shrugged off his coat and hung it up on the wall by the front door. He didn't know which room he was supposed to be sleeping in, or if it even mattered, so he simply let his feet take him wherever they felt, following the scent of fire and the hint of warmth in the freezing air of the building. Stepping into the warm observatory caused the lenses of Jamie's glasses to fog up, and he momentarily removed them to wipe away the condensation on his jumper. They softly exhaled as they placed them back on their nose, looking up at the distant ceiling in awe before their eyes drifted back down to the fireplace. Ray and Ghost had fallen asleep, slumped in the faded chairs before the dying fire. They seemed so peaceful there, no longer plagued by nightmares and pain, even if only for a moment. Jamie smiled. It was the first time he'd seen either of the men sleep comfortably, ever in the case of Ghost, and certainly the first time in a long time for Ray. He decided not to wake them, leaving that to the echoes of sunlight sliding onto the glass roof overhead. Jamie turned around silently and left them to sleep, if only for a little longer. Tomorrow they would wake, and the worry would set back in as they began their search for Athena once more. But that was tomorrow. Tonight, they could rest.